Greetings. In this video, we will build a basic backdrop of a room, and we will tile the wallpaper and floor and talk about limiting the sheen of the specularity. If we take a look here, you can see how that light is falling across and only being reflected on the pattern area. So we will create a black and white map that we insert into the specular channel, and that will designate where the specular is and where it isn't. Let's talk about our textures first. You'll want to locate a wallpaper, a tileable wallpaper, and we can just take something off the internet for this intermediary project. For your final, or anytime something's going to be showcased in your portfolio, you want to use original textures. You could draw or paint a wallpaper, or you could take a photograph of a wallpaper or find a royalty-free version. But pick a tileable wallpaper that you like. Pick a tileable floor. We're going to do a hardwood floor so that we can talk a little bit about sheen and bump mapping. So we want to have a hardwood floor. Once you've saved those two files to your desktop, we can take a look in Photoshop. So here's my tileable floor that I'll be using. Here is the wallpaper. And then from this wallpaper, we've generated that black and white map. And this is the map that will, in this case, go in the specular channel. And where it's white, it will have a high specularity. And where it's black, it will be completely flat. If you're unfamiliar, we just used the colored version and came to Image, Adjust, Black and White. And that will convert it to black and white. Now we want this to be black and this to be white, so we'll come to Levels. And on the left-hand side, you'll be able to scrub that up to black, and on the right-hand side, be able to scrub down. And so we've got, bring those together, and so we've got pure black and close to pure white. You'll be able to find that. And then we'll also eventually talk about how we can limit this. When we bring it in, it might be a little too shiny, but there are mechanisms in Maya by which we can limit the white or bump up the black. So you want to save as, make sure you don't save over your colored version. And I'll just throw those away. And just to review, we've got our colored tileable wallpaper. We've got our hardwood floor, which is also tileable. And then we generated a black and white map to correspond with our wallpaper. All right, back to Maya. Let's get started. And just again to review, you can see that sheen on there. That's why we generated that black and white map. All right, I'm going to delete this. We'll start with a polycube. We're going to make it twice the width and twice the depth. We'll leave it 1 unit high. And we're going to delete the top face and make sure we're Z forward. So we're always working Z forward, and then when we combine scenes, everything is facing and oriented in the same direction, and we'll delete that face. So I've got my floor and my two walls. We'll notice here that they are black. The texture side is facing out of our cube. So we'll select this as an object in the modeling mode. We'll come to Mesh Display Reverse. And so now we've got that inward facing and the black is on the outside. Let's put our pivot in this corner. That will make it easy to scale and place the entire room. So with my Move tool, you know that changing the pivot is tapping the D key. So there is pivot mode, tap it to get out, tap it to get in. And just a reminder, if you touch one of the arrows, now you're limited. So here I would be snapping only on the Y, here I would be snapping only on the X, and here I would be snapping only on the Z. So when we click it in the middle, we see all colors, which means we can snap in all directions or omnidirectional. We see green, red, and blue. And that little square with the yellow target there in the middle means that we're in the pivot point reposition mode. I'm going to hold down the V key and with my middle mouse button, snap right there and we get it in the corner. And then I'll hit the D key to get completely out of that, and we've put the pivot right in the corner. And then that means that now I can hold down the X key and we can snap that up onto the grid, and we can also scale. I'll just scale this up to demonstrate that it's scaling, but it's staying on the floor. That's why we wanted to put that pivot there. And ultimately, we'll scale this room to fit our rigged character. It's always easy when you're combining files, you want to scale and reposition the simpler. So it would be a little bit of a task to try and scale and reorient our rigged Jack-in-the-Box. Whereas here, scaling this and reorienting to fit the direction, position, and scale of your rigged Jack-in-the-Box, it's easy enough just by scaling here. All right, now we could map this as a singular object. If we were doing real-time application, this was going to be part of a video game, we would want to keep it a continuous surface. This has just the basic UV map, right? We could export this and then we could generate our tiles on here. Because we're going to be rendering a playback animation, the fact that we break this apart doesn't have any downside consequence, so it will make our life easier. So what we'll do is pick a face, right? And let me just reiterate, currently we have a singular cube. We deleted 3 faces, so this is a single object. And what we're going to do is break this into 3 faces. And so I've selected a face, and we can come to edit mesh, and then all the way down to extract. So extracting faces, you can pick any face on any poly model and extract it, and now we'll see that it's separate. If I come back into object mode, these two are still connected, but this one is independent. I'm going to hold down the shift key and hit the plus just so you can see how that laid out there. And then we'll separate this face as well. Same spot. Edit mesh, extract. And so now I've got the 3 separate pieces. One wall, the other wall, and the ground plane. Now our outliner is real messy here. Let's come up and we'll delete all of our history. And then we'll unparent these. So I don't need these transform nodes. So we'll come to unparent, and then that will allow us to delete those transform nodes. And I'm left with the 3 poly faces. Okay, let's start with the floor, and we'll right-click and assign new material. And we will talk about rendering and lighting both a Maya software version and an Arnold's version. But for this, we'll start with a Fong. The Arnold will render the Fong just fine. And when we get into the lighting section, if we want to convert that Fong to an AI standard shader, we can talk about those differences at that point. But for now, we've just added this Fong. Just review, I right-clicked, said assign new material, and chose Fong. It's up here. I can click on that tab if you wanted to get back. Just as a reminder, you can right-click and pull down to material attributes, and here we are. If we wanted to be diligent, we could label this floor, and then in our color channel, we're going to go find that floor texture that we downloaded. We'll come to File, we turn off the filter, and then we'll come and click on the Locate, and let me find mine. And so here's my folder, and we will choose Wallpaper JPEG. Oh, excuse me, no, floor. We're doing the floor, and we'll hit open. And so there it is. It's laid across the entire piece. And so what we want to do is tile it. We want to repeat it, I should say. So again, I'll come back to the floor Fong. In the color channel, I'll click here. Here is the file. That's where we just went and located it. And we have an additional tab, the Place 2D Texture. We can come here and we see the Repeat UV. And depending on your size, and I actually forget, probably 4 and 4. So a repeat on the U of 4 and a repeat on the V of 4. And you know what? I'm going to see what 6 looks like. Yeah, and so actually I'm going to go all the way to 8. All right, so for the size of my texture, right, because we're going to be zoomed in like this into the room, a repeat of 8 and 8. Let me just review how we got there. We right-clicked, we said assign new material, we chose Fong. In the color channel of the phone, we clicked on the map, we went out and we located our file, and then we came over to Place 2D Texture, and we said repeat UV 8 and 8, because it's a square, that's the same number, and that gives us about the size that we want. And that's it for the floor. Let's add our wallpaper. Right click, assign new material, and again we'll choose Fong, and you might say, well, that's kind of a plastic, it might make sense for a waxy floor, but what about the wallpaper? That's the reason we created that black and white map. We want just the pattern part to be shiny, so we need a Fong because the Fong has a specular color channel that we can plug that map into. But first, let's do the color. Same workflow as the floor. We'll click on color. We'll come to file. Now, in this case, sometimes you'll get dumped into the wrong tab. So it dumped me out into the 2D texture placement before I've even located the file. So if that happens to you, all we need to do is just click back on file. Nothing's been mapped yet. We'll turn the filter off, come and select, and we'll find wallpaper. And you see that that's mapped on there, but it's not repeating, and it's taking the entire space. So let's project a UV map. That will give us a better, right, because if we look now, that existing UV from the cube is just this little piece here. But our texture is taking up the whole UV space. So what we'll do is we'll project a UV. Now this would be on the X. So I'm coming to UV, and we're just going to planar, just a right angle projection of the UV. We'll open this, and we'll do it on the X, the X axis. I'll hit project, and now we see that the entire polyface fits our texture. Now we still want to repeat it, right? And we know that we've got it twice as wide. And so depending on your, if yours is a perfect square, we've doubled the width. And so we want to think about how we would repeat this. So I'm coming back, I've right clicked and just picked on it. Now we've got some history developing here. And so just to keep that clean, I'm going to come up and just delete all my history. Right, got rid of those actions that I had just taken. And we'll come out to Fong. Review, you could right click and pull down to material attributes. Let's say you had a lot of history that you needed to keep and you didn't want to have to kind of go all the way out to the shader. You can always right click and come to material attributes, and it will put you right there. So here is that color channel that we just mapped. Here it dumped us into the file this time, and we'll come over one to place texture, and I'm going to try 9 and 6. And so that gives us a nice repeating pattern there. Now take a look, because it's a Fong, the whole thing is equally shiny. That specular highlight is just falling across the whole thing. But remember, we want it to fall only on the pattern area and the darker area to be flat. So here we'll map, and let's remember that 9 and 6. We'll come back out. You could use this output to come back to the main shader, and of course you can right click and just come to material attributes, and that'll put you back on the front page. And then we'll come down to specular color. Now we can see that sheen here. If I pulled it all the way off, black represents 0 or off, so if my specular color is 0 or black, we don't have any sheen. You can see that I'm moving back and forth there and we don't see it. If I were to crank it all the way to 1, then you have this intense sheen, right? So 1 is all the way on, black is all the way off. The default is somewhere there in the middle, but we're going to map that black and white version of our wallpaper. So I'll click here, come to File, turn off the filter type. We'll click there and we'll come to, there we go, Wallpaper, black and white. And we'll hit that. Now you can see it's the wrong size, but it's a good demonstration of where it's white, it's shiny, and where it's black, it is flat. So we'll just come right out, and we remembered that we had typed in 9 and 6. And so now that matches. And so now you see the sheen is only on the pattern, on the decorative pattern. And in the area in between, we're not getting that sheen. So we can come back out here. We see we've got a map in our color, and we've got a map in our specular. And this gives us that kind of old style wallpaper. Now let's assign it over here. We'll open our Hypershade. This icon here, right? Or you can go to Windows, Hypershade. Sorry, I am so used to just hitting this icon, it took me a second. Rendering Editors, Hypershade. Gives us this. And now, if you labeled, it's always a good idea to label. And in fact, let's do that. So I'm going to select this, and where it says Fong 4, I'm going to say Wallpaper, and then that way we'll be able to see it. So here we go, and Wallpaper. With my middle mouse button, I'll just drag and drop. And we need a UV map for this one as well. Now, in this case, it's going to be on the Z, right? So this is the Z, and we'll come to UV, planar, we'll open the dialog box, we'll choose Z, and we projected it, and now that fits square, and that's how we were dialing in our repeats. And because that's the exact same size, it fits that just like the original one. So there's our textured walls and our textured ground plane. And the final thing that we want to do is give ourselves some baseboards. So I'm going to hide this away. And we'll hide there. And I'm going to jump into the orthographic front view. And we'll just use we'll create some NURBS curves and loft them. We'll come to Create, Curves, CV Curve Tool. And we'll make this larger. When you're modeling and snapping to the grid, it's almost always a different size than what it will be ultimately. So we're going to take advantage of grid snapping. This will make it very large, and then once we're done, we'll just scale it down to fit that room. I'm going to hold the X key and maybe come out here, X, X, X. And so that's kind of the top of the baseboard, I suppose. Let's say we come here and here, and maybe something like that. Now, if that's too wide, we can right-click and come back, and maybe we want to pull these in a little bit. So right, I took advantage of the grid, and then now we'll minimize the depth of the overall curve. So here's my curve. We'll come back, and we're going to duplicate this, edit, duplicate, and it doesn't matter how long I'm making it because we'll scale it after the fact. But we'll select both these curves, and with surfaces we'll come and loft. And we'll just leave this as a NURBS. You could convert it to a poly, and then you'd probably want to smooth it once. But there's no reason we can't just work, right? We're doing animated playback, so we can mix and match NURBS and polys in the same scene. Not the case if this was a real-time application of video game, but for animated playback, we can mix and match NURBS and polys and leave them separate. I'll now get rid of the curves, no longer need them, and let's bring back our room, and we'll see, right, our size is off, but we'll scale that down. I think that's about right, and we'll scale it up this way. Now, this doesn't have to be exact. This is really like a movie set. If you've ever seen a movie set or a television set, the sides of the set, right, don't matter because the camera is seeing the center of the set. So this is the side. So if you don't get it exactly, that's okay. Now, what we want to do is apply our shader before we duplicate it, just save us the time. So I'll right-click, and we will once again use a Fong, and I'll just call this base. And right, baseboards are typically white, but if you look here, CG without textures tends to look very artificial. It won't fit in the scene. We've got this nice wallpaper. We've got this nice hardwood floor. So let's add just some variability to the color. We'll come in here, and a fractal is a good place to start. And because we might be rendering in Arnold, we know that the procedural fractal works with Arnold. Some of these other procedurals don't, but the fractal does. Now you might say, well, that's way too much, and that's true. But why is this black and white? Let's come out and we'll repeat it just to find out how much. I think, let's say we went, you know what, I might have it backwards. Yeah, there we go. Let's say, yeah, so 5 and 20. So I needed a big repeat on the 20. And then, right, that's still way too much. And so what we want to do is come back to the fractal. And let me just remind us again, if we click totally off, we come here, right click, and I can come down to material attributes. And all we've done so far is map a fractal into the color channel. And in the 2D texture placement, we said repeat 5 on the U and 20 on the V. Now what I want to do, I'm coming back to the fractal. I'm going to take the amplitude way down so that we just have some subtlety, so that it's not just a flat color. You know, maybe there's some dirt or some rock, something there, so that it's not just pure color. And if I wanted to bring that out or minimize it, it's the amplitude there. And that just makes it seem a little bit less artificial. Now that we've done that, when we duplicate it, that shader will come with it. Edit, duplicate, and then hold down the J key, and we'll get that 90 degrees. I think that's 90, 105. So I'll come back one. There we go, 90. And we're working from that corner, so we can just slide this out. And oops, I went the wrong way. Sorry about that. Let's try that again. I'll come this way, and we'll slide it back. And again, these are penetrating, but that's okay, right? No one's going to check on our carpentry here. And if it doesn't fit there, that's okay, because this is, after all, a set. So there it is. Right? Probably the most interesting thing was getting that black and white sheen on the wallpaper, making sure that our repeats were the same. We've got our ground plane, we've got our baseboard, and now we're ready to save this. What we probably want to do is just select all of them, and we'll group them. Again, we're mixing and matching NURBs and polys because this is playback, and that's okay. If this were a room for a video game, we would want to convert those NURBS baseboards to polys and then combine everything into one. But in this case, we're just going to group it, and let's just call this room, and we'll save it. File, save scene as room. And then let's open our character, and we'll import it. Okay, so we've opened the latest version of your animated Jack-in-the-Box, and we'll import our room. And if you grouped it and titled it here, it'll be easy to find. You can see that it's very small. It's currently sitting inside of our Jack-in-the-Box. So we'll just scale this to fit. Now we're going to scale it up. We'll offset it, and the other thing that we're going to do is we're going to rotate it 45 degrees so that we're looking at the corner. So this would be 45 on the Y. And let's see, I've got the wrong front, so that's actually minus 45. Sorry about that. And we'll just position that. So here is our Jack-in-the-Box, right? And we're looking, right, we still got our Z forward, but we're looking at the corner. This will be a little bit more dynamic. Again, just for this, just as we're setting up lights, right? Better than just seeing a flat wall. A little bit more interesting to look down the corner. So I have rotate Y -45. For me, I scaled it up to about 15, and that seems to work. We can turn on our resolution gate. And so you can see this appears just like a movie set or television set. It appears like a room. And we've got our animation in there. And now you'll want to save as, and maybe even just increment and save after one save as. And we'll experiment in the next lesson with lighting. Okay, questions in the forum.